1. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. As you know, we're on the north side of 300 episodes, so we're excited to work our way towards 500 and 600. So we'll see where this all goes. But for today, I have another great question. And this one is going to really require us to do a deeper dive than maybe we normally do, just because this topic is so relevant. And so the question that I have for you today is, how do you find the right person for the right job? And on the surface, it feels pretty easy to be able to answer that question. And you're probably already thinking of how you do it. But I just want you to kind of put a pin in that and listen to who we have today, because he's got kind of a different approach, which I really am excited to unpack today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Mitch McDermott. How are you today, my friend?
Doing great, Dave. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, you are the founder of Talent Ascension Group. So fill us in on what Talent Ascension Group is and what you're doing over there in California.
Yeah, I started the firm essentially to bridge a gap in the recruitment sector. As a lot of you probably know, recruiting is definitely what I would classify as a red ocean. But a lot of models are a copy paste of each other. I saw a gap in how recruiting was done at the C-suite level through retained executive
Sure.
search.
Okay.
And everything below typically is relegated to a contingent search process. So same type of methodology and process for an entry level role up to like a director or VP. And I really saw an opportunity to create a hybrid of both. So that's
That's
essentially
awesome.
the intention of what I started our company to do, to bring the practices and standards of C-level search down to the mid layer of the org chart.
Cool. And you, great timing on your start time was in 2020. So
Yeah.
was that intentional, or how did that come
It
about?
wasn't intentional. I left my old company November of 2020, and it took 2 months
Okay.
off because I figure when am I ever going to have 2 months to just experience life? I was young, I was 25.
Sure.
Uh, did that and then started actually February of 2021. It
Okay.
wasn't an ideal time because that's when companies were coming out of 2020 and the surge of hiring picked up. So we had a lot
Gotcha.
of wind under our wings for the first year and a half of just a lot of incoming business because the demand was high.
Sure. Well, that's cool. Well, hey, Mitch, there's a lot of people listening right now that are envious of you and me because we have been able to start our business and successfully keep it running. But people are listening, and they want to hear your story about transitioning from corporate America to owning your own business. And I always, the caveat is there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Mitch is just going to give you his take on how he did it. Doesn't mean his is right or wrong. So we're not giving you got to do it this way. We're just giving you ideas on how other people have done it. So you were in corporate, and then what caused you in that spot? Did you know kind of earlier in your career that you eventually wanted to own your own gig, or how did that go for you?
I knew my whole life. I grew up with a dad who was an entrepreneur. I had businesses when I was even 10, 11 years old. So I always had creative ways to make money before I could actually go and get a job. And I feel like I'm really blessed that my dad instilled a lot of entrepreneurship thinking into how we were raised. So
Sure.
I knew I'd always have my own business. My background's interesting because I worked for a big company out of college for about a year. I lived in Sydney, Australia. When I moved home to Southern California, I actually joined a boutique firm of only like 5 people. Company had been around 10, 11 years. Owner wasn't able to scale it. And we took it from 5 to 25 people in less than 2 years. I was able to kind of come in as his right hand, reset the culture and the floor for performance standards, bring in new people. Basically, I set a new performance standard and then copy and pasted myself and others, redesigned the comp plan, really got the business, enabled the business to scale. And ultimately, I realized, the owner would always be my personal ceiling. He was a great guy, but we had different views, different beliefs. I really wanted to disrupt our industry and elevate our industry. And I felt like I was swimming against the current on a lot of the initiatives I drove that ended up leading to growth. And I
Sure.
realized, I realized, if I stick around, it's going to be too hard to leave, right? We're talking about equity and different things that would get me stuck there over a long
Yeah,
period of time. And I asked myself, do I see myself here in 3 years? And I said no. And then it was two,
yeah.
and then it was one. And over the course of a week of that thinking, I went in that next Monday and put in notice and stayed for 2 months to kind of transition out.
Sure. Wow. Did you know then when you were putting in your notice what you did want to do, or how did that come
I
about?
knew I wanted to create the model that we've created. And I was trying to do it there. And we were doing it a little
Sure.
bit, but he had a lot of limiting beliefs around, if we do this, we'll lose business. And I'm thinking, we're going to lose the business that we should lose, the ones that take the most time, provides the least amount of income or revenue. So
Sure.
I had a strategy in mind that I knew would work. And that's
Sure.
essentially what I built our company around.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, and you bring up some really important words that I don't want to gloss over. I want to make sure that the listener at least acknowledges for themselves because culture is a big thing. And a lot of people don't think they have a culture. And I think that's one of the biggest blind spots in business is thinking you don't have a culture. Every company has a culture. It may not be healthy, but it's still you have that. You also mentioned performance plans and comp plans. And so, did you have that business acumen from your time in corporate, or where did you pick up this kind of these ideas that you have? Because that's, I think, one of the things that's like you mentioned, a limiting belief, Mitch, that people listening right now, they may be in corporate America and they have these limited beliefs like, I can't do this. I don't know anything about culture. I don't know anything about comp plans. I mean, where did you pick up a lot of that stuff for you and your journey?
I feel like a lot of it was just figuring it out on the spot. I was always good with numbers naturally. I always understood business. I think, again, growing up in a household of a dad who started and scaled a company, we talked business at the dinner table. So I feel like that exposure definitely gave me a leg up. But a lot of
Sure.
this stuff was just finding bottlenecks and then
Yeah.
creating pathways to break through those bottlenecks that would lead to growth.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I think it's worth mentioning that for people listening, if you are anticipating some type of venture on your own in the future, I think it's important to realize that there will be bottlenecks. I think it's a misnomer to think that you're able to start a business, buy a laptop, and then sit on the beach and just work a couple hours a day, and then, massive amounts of income come in. If that works for you, hey, more power to you. I wouldn't get deflated if that doesn't work. And for you, did it kind of take off right away, Mitch, or was there was the runway longer than you had really wanted it to be?
Yes and no. So it did take off right away. It was a blessing and a curse. I had no idea what it was like running a business, right? I wasn't
Sure.
running the P&L at our last company.
Okay.
We overhired, we grew too quick, we weren't efficient. We ended up taking on about $250,000 of debt just to keep the lights on. I let go of half our team. I would say we're at the very end of a 2-year turnaround right now. So we did take off quickly, but we
Yeah.
had a house made of cards. We didn't have a solid foundation for our business.
Sure.
So the last couple of years have been getting out of debt. This will be our most profitable year ever. And I feel like
Awesome.
looking forward, now we have a solid foundation that we can scale from.
Sure.
I realized growing too quick, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, but now that I've learned them, I'm able to apply them and be really, really intentional about how
Yeah.
we grow, not just growing for growth's sake.
Yep, that's great. Well, and I tell you, growing too quick sounds like a great problem to have unless you're in it, because that is a painful spot to be because you see success, but yet it doesn't feel like success. And it may not even, depending on how you define success, like you said, a P&L really is going to tell you the profit and loss statement is going to be your guiding light. Did we make money or didn't we? If making money is one of your core values for a company, then obviously that's a hugely important piece. Um,
Yep.
but I think a lot of people struggle with that because they think they do grow too quick. So how did you figure that out? Did you have somebody help you, or was it just painfully obvious that it was something that was
It
happening
was
for you right in front of your
obvious
eyes?
something wasn't working. And I actually sat down with my dad and we had like a 4-hour meeting because I needed
Okay.
help. I wanted another pair of eyes. And the result of that meeting led to me getting rid of over half our team. And
Wow.
I didn't realize I wasn't running the company by the numbers. And I wasn't in QuickBooks every day checking our financials. I was kind of
Fair.
running it off a gut feeling. And that
Right?
taught me a
No
lot,
news
right?
is
I'm
good
like,
news, right, Mitch?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't have a scoreboard.
Yeah.
So when he looked at everything, he's like, you have a problem. You guys are
Yeah.
overstaffed. Your team's not producing at the level they were before. You don't
Yep.
have enough, business coming in to support this team. So he really helped open my eyes to the problem.
Yeah. Wow,
And
that's awesome.
it was pretty clear what I needed to do to keep the
Yeah.
business alive.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, again, there's so many different ways to look at this. And one quick way that we've done it in the past is just a super simple way is you take your amount of sales and you divide it up by how many people you have. Like one of the companies that I owned, I had, we were doing 10 million in sales annually and we had 22 people. So for simple math, we were running at about $500,000 of sales per person,
Mhm.
and it was interesting because when you stay within your industry and you start asking that question to competitors outside your area, you start to get a feel for, wow, somebody else is doing 400, someone else might be doing 600. But
Yeah.
it gives you just kind of a read as to where you're at. But I like the concept that you thought that, you know what, hey, I don't look at my P&L every day. And I think that that's one thing. If you have a CEO or a CFO or somebody that is, into the numbers, great, make sure that they're looking at it every day. But I think that's a really good word for the group right now listening is make sure you are dialed in deep to your financials because it can feel really good. I mean, and we're all consumers too, right, Mitch? So we've seen these big monster companies file bankruptcy just out of nowhere, and whether they knew it was coming or not, I'm sure they had a pretty good idea, but watching financials has got to be one of the biggest things we miss in running our business. How have you fixed that now, or are you much more aware of your financial situation?
Yes. I have a weekly meeting with myself where I basically go through all of our financials. I don't
Okay.
necessarily check every day, but I'm in it pretty regularly. And I actually upped our bookkeeper. We had a bookkeeper that was kind of like break fix, so I got a outsourced company that does a little bit more so I can
Okay.
really trust the numbers too, because that's half the battle. You got to make sure everything's categorized and your books are accurate to be able to even run off of them.
Yeah, how many people don't know how to read a profit and loss statement, don't know what their books are like? And again, they may see the bottom line and it may be black and they think, wow, this is awesome, right? And then they just kind of forget about it for a while. And, it's one of those things that's kind of like babysitting. You got to keep watching that kid. You have to keep watching your books because they just get off kilter so easy. And even like a month, you can be like, oh man, we had a bad month. I mean, we knew every month what was the average percentage of sales for that month. So, 5% was January and 8% was February, whatever the numbers were. That was at least a litmus test for us to be able to see how are we doing. So, I'm glad that you have been able to right the ship because a lot of people are struggling with that, and some even listening. So, again, if you're listening, think of what Mitch did in this case where he brought somebody in from the outside. I mean, that's a cool thing too. It's painful. It's vulnerable. You have to trust the person. There's a lot to get there. It's way outside your comfort zone. Was it hard for you to bring somebody in at first in that capacity?
No, I mean, I already had a bookkeeper, but I was using them based off of price versus
Yeah.
quality. And it was, again, kind
Yeah.
of break fix bookkeeping. QuickBooks automates everything. So I'm like, this is easy stuff. And then I
Yeah.
went with a more consultative company that we have more of a partnership with that,
Awesome.
we do monthly financial meetings. So I wanted a little bit more horsepower from but no, for me, I've always been very open and very comfortable with books and numbers and those things, as long as I trust that it's getting
Yeah.
done correctly, obviously.
Garbage in, garbage out is always a challenge because if you put bad intel in, you're going to get bad intel out. So,
Yep.
great, great stuff. So I want to, fast forward now to where you are running a successful talent group, and I want to kind of dig into the question that we asked at the beginning. So, right person, right job. We've heard things like right person, wrong seat on the bus.
Yep.
We've heard different things like that. So, from a placement perspective, let's just throw this out. So, someone listening right now is short a person or short some people. Their options are to throw ads on Indeed, throw ads on LinkedIn. Um, that's kind of like going to just try to find somebody, just the old-fashioned way. The whole idea of recruiting somebody, there's kind of some like positives and negatives to that. So I'm just curious, what are some of the positive reasons why somebody listening right now, would want to potentially invest in having a partner like you guys at the Talent Ascension Group?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest reason is to find headhunted candidates. And it really comes down to picking the right firm and understanding their methodology to recruiting. I would advise anyone listening that wants to engage a recruiter to really dig into how they're actually getting people, because there's a lot of firms that just replicate what they could easily do on their own, post a job, manage inbound leads. There's not a lot of companies that will actually go out and find you someone who's not looking. And that's our biggest value add is I do believe in most markets, especially if you're looking for a salesperson, the best talent is going to be tightly held on to. So if you're
Right.
posting a job, those people aren't going around LinkedIn. They're not responding to a mass message. They
Yeah.
have to be actually hand recruited in a very unique way to get them
Sure.
engaged, get them over the fence to at least just have an exploratory conversation with you.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest value add. I also think from a hiring standpoint, some leaders we work with hire one or two people a year, if that. We're hiring
Yeah.
hundreds. So being
Yeah.
able to work with an expert partner who can prescribe in certain ways, right? Sometimes companies don't really know what they need. They tell us the problem. And then we come in and prescribe based on what we've done for other companies. Here's, I think, how we could position this. Here's what I would recommend looking at, and kind of
Sure.
guiding them through the hiring process.
Okay. And it feels like this kind of really starts at the job description. I mean, it feels like that is in my limited experience that I've had, hiring, whether it's for myself or now working with clients on a, one-off basis, trying to find certain people, and the first question I ask is, what does the job description look like? And, you get this list of things, and the job description, it like ad nauseum explains the tasks that need to be done,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really ask much or talk much about the kind of person that you really want to find. And I'm just curious, is that what your experience has been in the hundreds and thousands of people that you've worked with over the years? Is it more about the task for a lot of people than the actual person?
Almost always. And I'm personally not a big fan of job descriptions because I
Okay,
realize, especially nowadays, we'll meet with a company to kick off a project, and I can look at a job description. You could tell they threw something into ChatGPT, and then the job description becomes the Bible for the search.
gotcha.
I like to focus on hiring for the need, less of, hey, here's what we think we need, more of what are we solving for in the business? Nobody hires to just add to their payroll expense, right? There's a
Fair.
need, there's a gap or an impact you're looking for. I like
Yeah.
to start with that and then work our way backwards to find people who have proven experience or who have potential to make that impact within the organization. I call
Yeah.
it more of hiring for results versus hiring for criteria.
Oh, that's great. And I think that that's a big blind spot thinking that, and again, I'll date myself by, you have to have X number of words per minute, or, back in the day when that was important, or you need to know QuickBooks, or you need to know, there's like this plethora of things that people want. And they really don't seem to care that they do fit into that culture we talked about before, or they are going to be an asset to the customer. Are you looking at the whole person when you're trying to find the right person for the right job? I mean, does personality come into play? Different things like that. How do you address those things?
We look at the whole person. Yeah. We're not just looking to match a resume with a job description. I think that's a big differentiator for us is we truly get to know the person behind the resume.
Okay,
Uh, Not just their qualifications, their skills, their culture alignment, and who they are, even long-term career goals. I want to know where do you want to be in 5 years? Because if
sure.
where they want to be is more aggressive than what our client can offer, they're going to probably leave in 2 years. So what
Yeah.
I try to do is match the long-term potential of the role with the career aspirations of the candidate to create the type of placements that will stick around for a very long time.
Wow. And that's hard to think about. That's one of the tougher questions, Mitch, is where do you see yourself in 5 years? A lot of people are like, I don't even know where I see myself in a month from now.
Yeah.
They haven't done that self-discovery. They haven't invested that time. Do you get a lot of people that struggle to answer that question of where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Most people don't. Most people have somewhat of an idea, right? And what I'm looking for is I'll share this with you. I put candidates into three archetypes. There's builders, there's improvers, there's maintainers. When I
Okay.
scope a role with a customer, I'm listening for what kind of job this is, right? Are they looking for someone to plug a hole? Do they need someone to kind of be transformational? Or do they need someone to take something from current state to future state? Um, that's what I look at as like the long-term need. And then when we talk to candidates, it's about understanding, do they want to grow? Are they a controller that wants to be a CFO one day? Do they want to be a controller forever? Do they have those kind of long-term ambitions or not, right? The people that have it tend to know. The people that
Sure.
have less of the long-term ambition, from my experience, are the ones that maybe don't have as clear of a path. The ones that are thinking about it are going to be more of those intentional builder type profiles.
Sure. Awesome. So it's builder, improver, and maintainer. Did I get
Yeah.
those right? Awesome.
Yep.
Hey, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, I want to unpack that, and then I want to talk about your 9 stages, and we can go through a couple of those because there was some real fun stuff in there. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Mitch McDermott, the founder of Talent Ascension Group. And we are talking about answering that question of how do you find the right person for the right job? And we've kind of gotten to the point where we realize that there's more to it than just a resume aligning with a job description. And I think, oddly enough, you can put whatever you want on a job description. You can also put whatever you want on a resume. I mean, I could put I was a brain surgeon and, unless they literally are going to start checking up on me, I could pass for one until I got in the operating room. That'd be a major issue. But that's what I feel bad for is for the people that are hiring that somebody has something on their resume and they may have embellished it or they may have not done it to the level that they say in their experience there. How do you kind of like work through that? I'm just curious if you have any ideas on how do you work through that? Like you talked about a salesperson. We talked about it before we jumped on. I could tell you, hey Mitch, I could sell ice to Eskimos. You hire me because you're all excited, thinking I'm going to just explode your sales, and growth, and then I can't sell a hot dog to a starving man, and there we're stuck. I'm a square peg in a round hole. You're into me for some money because you've invested 6 or 9 months. How do you, number one, we want to prevent that from happening. Do you see that happening a lot where there is a round peg, square hole type scenario?
Not often. I would say out of all the people we place, we have a 6 month replacement guarantee. We do about one replacement search a year,
Okay,
which I think says a lot about our process and how we do it.
fair.
I think it's about interviewing the person, not the resume. When you interview for a job description, what I find is people they just want to check a box. Okay, they've done this, they've done that. When you interview the person, I almost look at it like going on a date with somebody. You
Yeah,
know, they say something interesting, then you ask five more questions about that topic. You start to peel the layers of the onion back. So someone goes, "Hey, I could sell ice to an Eskimo. Really, what was your numbers last year? What's your average sale?" Like I dig into those numbers and I want to know that where do you sit amongst your team? Have you hit President's Club? Do you have any noteworthy accomplishments? So like by the time we put them forward to our client, I know every number, every detail about their past 3 to 5 years of sales performance, the types
yeah,
of tools they're working, the types of customers they're selling into. And we do that same process for almost every role we work on. It's about hearing the first answer and then questioning it, being intellectually curious, really diving into who they are. And
Yeah.
what you find is if they can't answer a level 2 or level 3 question, the depth probably wasn't there. It was probably something they had exposure to. Other
Yeah.
things are listen for we versus I. People who do things say I. People who contribute or leverage a team say we. And that could be
Gotcha.
another trigger to know, are they actually doing the work or are they just part of
Fair.
something bigger where maybe they've gotten a
Wow.
little bit of exposure to it?
That's great. And just that's the interesting thing about this whole thing, Mitch, is it's just these little small things like the difference between I and we. I think that that's where I feel like, for the guy or girl that recruits and hires one or two people a year, this isn't your forte. This is just maybe it's an interruption in your day. Maybe it's something you don't even really want to do. If that's the case, is that kind of where Talent Ascension Group comes in? Do you fill that gap for like if I was looking for somebody and I didn't know how to do the process or my process was old or antiquated. Is that where you guys jump in then and kind of take over for an entrepreneur that doesn't want to do it?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of our business, especially the entrepreneur-led businesses, we're really coming in and again, I look at us like the doctors of hiring. It's more prescriptive. It's really understanding the company, understanding the need, what they're looking to
Yeah,
accomplish long term, and then guiding them throughout the process. It's much more consultative. And the hires tend to be more emotional, right? Big companies, sometimes they just want to button a chair. But when it's your business and it's your profits that you're investing into that, your cash, it can be an emotional hire, and sometimes that can actually hurt your ability to bring in the
yeah.
right people.
What?
Yeah.
No, no, go ahead.
Oh no, no, that was it.
I think it's a huge blind spot though for people to do what you just said is, and comes and goes based on how well the job market is. But that thought process that, hey, at least I got meat in the seat, at least I have somebody there that can, pick up the phone. That's kind of dangerous in my mind because just because someone's there doesn't mean that they're engaged, doesn't mean that they're trying to help the customer, doesn't mean that they're going to match that culture. So you talk about a human-centered recruitment experience. Is that kind of what we've been talking about, where we look beyond just the resume and we start to get to know that person better?
Exactly. I make the entire process about the person on both sides, right? When a hiring leader and a business owner hires, right, they don't just want to button a chair. There's a reason they're bringing that role in. And I want to understand that deeper reason. My goal is to connect the deeper purpose of the role with the deeper purpose and vision of that candidate. And obviously the skill sets that can translate to driving those results and impact. So that we really have been talking a lot about the human-centered recruitment
Sure.
process that we bring into our clients' businesses.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing, Mitch, that a lot of people are concerned or nervous about the amount of time that this is going to take for them. But I gotta believe that if they, as the business owner, invest time with you up front, is it kind of one of those things that you just take it and run with it for a while so that you
Yeah.
minimize the amount of time that entrepreneurs, business owners have to invest? So it feels like you guys meet at the beginning, you do your search, and then as you start to find people, then do you run those past the business leaders and then kind of set up interviews? I mean, kind of walk us through what that looks like if you could.
Yeah, it's white glove. So, we do a kickoff call, typically 30 to 45 minutes. After that, we'll have a slate of candidates in 5 to 10 days. Our turnaround's pretty quick. And then
Okay.
from there, it's managing the entire interview process, scheduling interviews all the way through an offer. We actually run the offer negotiation process with candidates that aren't looking. Half the battle is finding who you want, the other half is securing them. And I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of good match placements fall apart because of negotiations, and especially the ones again where it's entrepreneur ran, it's emotional.
Fair.
And I look at two ways to hire, right? Hiring could be seen as an expense or it could be seen as an investment. You
Yeah.
tend to get what you value. If you value cost, you're going to get cost. If you value an investment, you're going to end up getting an ROI from that hire. So sometimes we spend a lot of time even just coaching our clients through the offer mediation to ensure that they can successfully bring on the right person and attract that person. But yeah, it's a white glove process, end to end. It's funny too, the more we work with a client, the faster it gets. We had a
Okay.
client for 10 years. We got a director level role, which again, the more senior roles tend to take a little bit more time. I think
Sure.
we sent a candidate and got an offer in like a week and a half. But we've done a lot of work with them. We know their culture. We sent them two people because we didn't need to send five. We know who they
Yeah.
are. We can do our
Sure.
job even better. So the
Wow.
process can be pretty quick, especially if it's a client we've done a lot of work with and we know like who they
Yeah.
are, the kind of people
Sure.
that we want to bring in.
Wow. Well, and that's another blind spot I'm guessing that people have is that I want a plethora of people to
Yeah.
look at, and for the some of the jobs that I've worked with people on, if you get 30 candidates, that's like way too much, so you take and put
Yeah.
into A, B, and C buckets or whatever. There's some, this guy isn't going to work, this girl's not going to work, so you have your bucket of people that aren't going to work. I'm assuming the more dialed in that you get, the less unqualified candidates that you have so that you're
Yep.
really presenting one, two, or three or whatever. Is there an optimal number that really we should be trying to look at if we're partnering with you on something like this?
3 to 5.
Okay.
3 to 5. Again, with clients we would do a lot of work with, we just sent the first two people we had and they said, hey, like we're gonna hire this guy pretty quickly. So
Yeah,
we had more that we were gonna share and like, hey, I think we found our person. We agreed. We thought that candidate was probably the one that we're gonna hire.
sure.
But yeah, I would say 3 to 5. You want to have comparisons, but I think
Okay.
if you hire the right recruiting firm, and
Yeah,
there's some that will spam 10, 15 resumes because they're kind of creating a lot of activity and crossing their fingers. It's more of a volume approach. But if you
right.
work with a more consultative partner like us, the goal is you're not wasting your time interviewing bad people. Like we have we've had searches where we sent four and the client literally got all four to the final round and we're doing our call just understanding who he should hire because all
Sure.
four could do the job, fit the culture. So I think the goal of hiring a firm like us is we take the burden of the process off your plate. Let us go interview 50 to 100 people and then filter down the best, 5 to 10% of those to you. And then you spend your time interviewing the best available talent in the market. Seeing
Yeah.
10 people, seeing 12 people to me is leveraging resources and time that are unnecessary. And again, at that point, you're just generating results for the sake of results versus
Yeah.
getting the right results, the right quality.
Well, and you talk a lot about like expectations, and in prepping for today, I saw that you have like 9 stages. And so if you could you just like, you don't have to go through all nine, but like what is that kind of, it just felt like it was so complete, and
Yeah.
so it felt like I could really just give you the information and pull my hands away from the steering wheel, so to speak. So are
Yeah.
there any of those stages that really stick out that you want to share, make sure that people listening today at least get a sense of what those are about?
Yeah, I think the most important stage in our process is the search kickoff, right? It's where we get alignment because at the end of the day, we have to learn your business, we have to learn the need. And I think that's where companies, even if they don't engage a firm, right, they do their own typically internal kickoff, their own deliberation. And I
Sure.
think framing that for what you really need for the business is going to be critical. Again, there's hiring for impact and there's hiring for criteria. But also something a lot of companies don't think about when they start a search is how will we attract what we want? Just like dating, right? You have to become the kind of partner that attracts the kind of partner that you want. Well, same goes for companies. And getting really clear on their story. Something I don't think a lot of leaders do that we put into our process is what's the narrative? What's the story? What are our selling points when we have someone who tells us they're not looking that's perfect for you that we can use to get them over the fence? So I think that exercise is really critical because we won't be able to get them the best people in the market if they don't have a compelling story. And same goes for companies even hiring on their own. They make the interview process a lot about them and they forget that great talent has options. So you also have to make sure you're spending half the interview giving the candidate an opportunity to learn why you're an employer of choice and
Sure.
what life could look like and how it could be better with you.
I'm assuming that a successful interview is really more about the candidate talking than it is the person doing the interview. I've been in situations where, the guy or girl does the majority of the talking as the one looking to hire, and the candidate's just kind of like not really even able to answer much.
Yeah.
So in your world, are you really pushing for that candidate to really be talking way more than the person doing the interviewing?
Yes. I actually have a line. I'd say make it about the candidate. Most
Yeah,
companies and even recruiters make it about them. Make it about the candidate. And I also find when you do that, you give yourself more opportunities to observe. Like I personally believe I learn more from the questions candidates ask in an interview than how they answer my questions.
gotcha.
Especially when I'm hiring for us and they apply to a role and like, you know, they're prepared for what I'm going to ask for the most part, right? They can look at the
Yeah,
posting, look at what we do, but the questions they ask show me what they value. Is money their first question? It's okay if they
sure.
value money, but I want to know who they are, what they value. Do they ask about growth? Do they ask about these deeper things? Are they looking for a career? Are they just looking for a job where they punch in
Yeah,
and punch out? So I really do believe putting the candidate at the center of your process is how you're able to really make the discrepancy between who is truly aligned and who's not. When you make it
yeah,
about you, you give a lot of the answers to the test away too. We need this. Here's what we're looking for. And then you start asking the
right,
questions, and they have all the answers already. So what do you
right.
expect? Right? You're going to hear
Yeah.
what you want to hear.
Well, especially if you say this is what we're looking for, I've yet to have somebody go, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know what that means."
Yeah.
Everybody's already done it, been there, done that, succeeded, got the t-shirt type of thing. And then again, you go through that hire, and then you find out a year later, 9 months to a year later, that this is not a fit. And then you're in a bad spot because you've already invested a bunch of money. Now I have to decide, am I going to try to acclimate the job to the person, or am I going to continue to try to whittle that person down to fit into that job? So I think that's what's so powerful about working with somebody like Talent Ascension Group is you probably don't have that because you've done all your work. And again, this has got a 6 month guarantee behind it. How does that guarantee work? What kinds of things does that cover?
Anything. So
Okay,
is the only way they have to last 6 months for the guarantee to expire, but it
right.
protects both sides. So that's something a lot of companies don't think about. It's not just about that person not working for you, it's also maybe you not working for them and them
Yeah,
leaving. So it protects any instability of the placement. So for whatever reason, if they're not there within that 6 month frame, then we go and we do a free replacement search.
gotcha. Well, and I think that's so powerful because you're going to find out a ton in 6 months. I've been in situations where people knew within the first 2 weeks
Yeah.
that something wasn't going to match, and like nothing worse than, again, if you're that business owner and we paid you for your time and effort, now I feel like I have to make that work because I paid you and I sure don't want to pay you again for somebody that's only lasted, in this case, 2 weeks, 6 months,
Yeah.
whatever. But I love that.
I'll share
As
something
we,
interesting
yeah,
too that could be
yeah, go ahead.
informative. The industry average is 90 days.
Okay.
I did 6 months because personally, and as a business owner, 90 days isn't always long enough either, right? Like
Yep.
I believe the first 90 days, you don't really know who you hired yet. They're a new employee, they're putting on a little bit of a front, they want to impress you. What I find is once they get comfortable is where the person I truly hired starts to show. And I
Yeah.
think, especially in sales, right? Because we talked a little bit about sales. Um, sometimes it takes time to even generate those kind of results, depending on the
Right.
sales cycle. So it
Yep.
is interesting. If it's 2 weeks, you really did something wrong.
Yeah.
But good hires, people that appear good that maybe aren't, those signs, in my opinion, tend to show up around the 120-day mark.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think 90 days is a good number to think for onboarding.
Yeah.
Most people have onboarding that lasts like a day, maybe a week. It's crazy. I had somebody that I knew worked with whatever, that their onboarding was like 5 minutes. There's the bathroom, here's your desk, here's your computer, here's your login, let me know if you got any questions type of thing. And it was just like, wow, that's just crazy. And then when you tell somebody that your onboarding should be in the 75 to 90-day range, people just don't know what to do with that. So I think that's having 6 months, like you mentioned, is fantastic. So thank you for sharing that. As we start to land the plane today, I want to ask about like what trends are you seeing in recruiting and retaining the best employees? Are there things that you're seeing that maybe we're missing because you're so dialed deep into it? I'm just curious if you're seeing any special trends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big trend right now is the job search system is broken. Companies that
Okay,
want to hire on their own, that are using the tools they did 5 years ago, no longer generate the same output due to primarily AI and technology. It's become too
okay,
easy to apply to a job. It's too easy to screen candidates with technology. And there's a lot of great companies looking for great people and great people looking for great companies, and they're not able to find each other, which is why I'm so passionate about putting the human back into the hiring process.
sure,
Another trend I'm seeing too, this could be interesting, is we're getting a lot of clients actually looking to level up their commercial teams. I think looking forward with some uncertainty, really bringing in sales leaders and individual contributors that can actually drive more net new business,
yeah,
bringing in true hunters versus farmers. So we're seeing a lot.
sure,
This is across industries. Companies really dial in their sales organizations and level up the talent they have on board. And another thing too with technology, I think leadership's got to change a lot in the next few years. And one of the things I see with companies who retain top talent is they individualize the employment experience, right?
mm,
COVID kind of disrupted the synergy we had in employer and employee relationships. The power was
sure,
very on the employee side. Now it's coming back to the company side a little bit.
sure,
Uh, what I see companies do is really make it about, again, the individual, understanding what their currencies are. Some people it's money, some people it's freedom, some people it's remote work, whatever they truly value, and being able to kind of individualize that experience. It's a
yeah.
really unique thing I see some great companies doing now to really retain their people versus having very general standards across the entire organization, making it more specific to each person and what they value to make sure that they're meeting those needs on an
Yeah.
individual level.
Wow, that's great. Well, and I think that, yeah, the days of just hiring for, without really knowing the person, I think that is you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think that's when it only lasts a couple months, and I don't, it'd be great to see what the research shows, like how long do, self-recruited people last versus placed people by
Mhm.
professionals like yourself, because I'm guessing there's a pretty big difference there because it's what you do every day. I mean, I could change my oil if I had to, but it sure wouldn't end well. I mean, I'm sure there'd be oil all over. I'd miss, there's just a whole plethora of things that I wouldn't do right. Maybe the end result would be the same, maybe not, but that's where I feel like you guys are so well versed in this. Not even to bring up all the legal things and the HR violations and all the stuff that I hear in some of these. You can't even ask them if they're married anymore. You can't even ask them how old they are. I mean, there's all these things that, like, you just think are normal questions, and you got to kind of dissect when they went to high school or college or blah blah blah. You got to be a sleuth to ask and find all these questions. But I love those trends, and I think hopefully it's going to help the entrepreneur listening right now that might be on the edge between, should I do this myself or should I hire somebody like Talent Ascension Group. I'm hoping that this discussion has at least open their eyes to what other options there are. So I appreciate that. Couple last questions, Mitch, before I let you go. What would your tip of the day be today? Maybe it's something that we covered, maybe it's something we haven't talked about yet, but for somebody listening that is looking to hire, what would your tip of the day be for them?
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a common theme for this one, but interview the person, not the resume.
And dig, kind of expound on that just a tad, because again, all we have in our meeting is this
Yeah.
resume of where you worked and what you did. I mean, how do you transition that away from like, tell me about yourself, or, how do you make that transition? Because I agree with you. I just think some people struggle with that
Yeah.
transition.
Yeah, great question. I apply it by, again, making it about them, getting to know who they are, what they value. So I would normally ask, what are your goals for your career the next 2 to 3 years? Where do you see yourself? What are you looking for out of a company? What kind of environment do you feel like you'd be most successful in? Um, those questions start to get things turning as far as, well, I really like big company. Well, I'm an entrepreneur-led business. We move a lot of different directions. It's probably not going to work, right? Like starting to ask those questions where it's really hard to make something up about who
Yeah,
they are, the kind of environment that they value. Even things like digging into like why they left their last few companies, even if they're not a job jumper, but understanding what led to their instability
yeah,
can be helpful too. Well, this happened and this changed, and just also the talk track. Are they a victim? Is everything happening to them? Do they take
yeah,
ownership of certain things? Do they have resentment in how they talk about things at past companies? You're listening not just for what they say, but how they say it. And I think
yeah.
that's a big difference about interviewing the person is you're looking for those underlying cues
Sure.
that start to tell a story.
That's great. And we do a ton of work on communication. And that's one of the things I think that you're talking about here is like if you ask somebody a question, you're trying to listen to the answer. But so many times we're formulating our next question, we're really not listening. So that's where I think either multiple people in an interview is helpful, or, working with somebody like you guys, because you would most people wouldn't even be able to tell that. I think that's a great example, the victim role, the victim role. If you ask why did you leave your last three companies, and all three was the boss's fault, someone on the team's fault, and then, someone else's fault. If you as the candidate take zero responsibility, now maybe it's accurate, but usually it's not 100% their fault and you are 100% in the right. So I think it's huge to take the liability there, and take one for the team, so to speak. But a lot of people wouldn't hear that, and you gotta ask your questions in a certain way. So even more reason to work with somebody like the Talent Ascension Group. So this has been really helpful, Mitch. I appreciate this, and the listener does too. And I just want to ask one last question before I let you go. If there's somebody listening right now and they want to learn more about you guys, maybe they have a hiring question, they
Yeah.
have something that they want to ask that they don't know the answer to, what's the best way for people to connect with you, Mitch?
Yeah, there's two ways. I would say the best would be through LinkedIn. Again, Mitch McDermott at Talent Ascension Group. I also put a lot of content along the lines of things that we're talking about of how companies can apply some of the things that we discussed around human hiring.
Okay.
We've got a lot of free information I get out there, but I think LinkedIn's a great way. Also, on our website, there's a form that they can submit to shoot over their information. And if anyone's interested in having a conversation or getting some questions answered that you were inspired by from this discussion, please reach out.
Awesome. Is there a charge to chat with you for the first time?
No, no, there's no charge.
Perfect. And so that's what I think is so powerful for the listener. And I just want to encourage you, rather than jump into your next podcast or jump into your next activity, is just sit with this. If there's something that resonated with you today with what Mitch said, I think it's really helpful to sit with it and really, have a conversation. It doesn't cost anything. You can, call while you're driving. Try not to email while you're driving, probably not the smartest, but it's one of those things that it's like, man, this guy's done it. He's doing it. He's done it for hundreds of people, so he knows all of, or most all of, the answers to your questions. And I think it creates a great opportunity to transition from that resume to that human being, because I think we forget that we are hiring a human being that has feelings and family, and they have pain of their own, they're struggling with things, they have strengths, they have successes. And I don't think that we do a good enough job of acknowledging that. We're always trying to, again, do you know this program, or do you know this person, or did you meet this sales goal? Those are important, but again, I think there's just another level of that. And I think that Mitch did a great job today of explaining that. So thank you so much for that, Mitch. And I can't wait to keep watching you guys and see where this goes. And I appreciate all the information today. And for people, if they want to go to talentascension.com is the website, and or go to Mitch McDermott on LinkedIn and have a conversation, because I definitely think it's you can learn something. I took notes here, so now I got to do something with these, Mitch. So thank you so much for that, and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure.